The next chapter, we're going to start looking at the progressive era. Now, if you look at the root word of progressive, you see progress. Right? We're going to be focusing on the progress that is made in American society at the turn of the century. Sometimes the people that try to enact change are referred to as reformers. Sometimes the more popular name is Muckrakers. We'll look at those people individually, so this will just be more of an overview of the three things or the three areas that they were trying to enact change in. Right. First thing we need to discuss is what are progressives. Okay, that's anybody who wants to bring about change in society, right? And just this period became known as the progressive era, so they were referred to as progressive reformers. You can see our three key words of social studies: political, dealing with government, trying to bring about changes in government; economic, anything that has to do with money; and finally social, which deals with the everyday lives of people in the United States. All right, some techniques that they use. The term muckrakers, that focused more on journalists, crusading journalists who were trying to bring about change through the media. But you could say newspaper, writing articles, traveling around the country, giving speeches. Jacob Riis is going to use photographs. Upton Sinclair, Ida Tarbell using books. All right, so goal number one, promoting social welfare. This is trying to make life better for people in the United States. Now, certain groups are definitely going to need more assistance than others. So progressives try and help the unemployed, immigrants, and the poor. Obviously, help the unemployed find jobs, teaching immigrants how to speak English, because that was the big obstacle that kept them from being successful in the United States, and also providing food, clothing, education to the poor. All right, the big example, or the big push that was made, was through the use of settlement houses or community centers. Now, we've talked about Jane Addams a little bit in the last chapter. She comes back again in this chapter. Her settlement house in Chicago, the Hull House, was probably the most famous, and you can see some of the pictures, okay, providing new opportunities and assistance to those people who were in need.
National events determine our ideals as much as our ideals determine national events.
All right, continuing with social, we have the women's suffrage movement. Now, don't be confused, right? A lot of people, when they see the word suffrage, right, they automatically think it must be bad because it sounds just like suffer. But suffrage is simply the right to vote. So when we say women's suffrage, we mean the right to vote for all women. Right now, the women's movement began in 1848, so we're looking at almost 50 plus years of women trying to get the right to vote. Now, some of you may remember in the Reconstruction era, where we talked about banned citizen vote, we talked about the 15th Amendment, which gave the right to vote to all citizens, meaning state governments could not deny the right to vote for citizens on account of race, color, previous condition of servitude. And we had mentioned how the one word that was not there was gender. So women were not allowed to vote based on their gender. So obviously that kind of set the stage for some animosity and some frustration, because African Americans were given the right to vote before women.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
Right, and one more social problem that the progressives tried to fight against was the temperance movement, or the presence of alcohol in society. They considered it a social evil, right, that led to a lot of the problems we had in society, such as family abuse and child neglect. Right, so the push to try and ban the sale of alcohol is successful, right, with the 18th Amendment, but there's going to be certainly problems that come about as a result of the banning of alcohol, right? We know that the 18th Amendment gets repealed by the 21st Amendment, so the government pretty much realizes that it was harder to enforce it than it was to try and stop the evil it caused in society. So with the 18th Amendment, alcohol becomes illegal, at least the banning, the sale and production of it. It leads to speakeasies, which are illegal bars, but more importantly, it leads to the rise of organized crime. So you can see the picture down here of Al Capone. Okay, the organized crime starts to take over and control the sale and production of illegal alcohol. So that would be one of the downsides of that. Right. Other social problems could be the unhealthy, unsafe living conditions, especially in tenement buildings. Right. You can see some of the pictures here. Tenements were overcrowded, unsafe apartment buildings, lots of people in a small area, right? A lot of these people would be the poor or the immigrants. They really didn't have a choice in the conditions that they, or the apartments that they were able to afford, right? So a lot of times you had large families living in a small apartment because it was all that they could afford. The second goal is expanding democracy, right? Trying to get the people more involved in the procedures of government. So one issue that was around at the period was called patronage, which simply means you're giving your jobs or giving government jobs to people who supported you along the way. Now, it could be your oldest friend. It could be one of your most loyal supporters. It could be somebody who was not adequately trained or prepared for the job, but you gave them the job anyway because they helped you along the way. And people considered that a problem, and rightfully so. All right, so the progressive era brings about the civil service exam, which is still used today. It determines who is most qualified for that particular government job. All right, and then a couple of four principles that come into play here, all about, once again, restoring democratic power, meaning bringing people, allowing people to have more say in what goes on in government. The first one is direct primaries. Now, that's where all the people in a particular political party, they vote and select who the presidential candidate is going to be from their particular party. So we just had the recent election. We had the Republican primaries. There were multiple Republican candidates that wanted to run for president, and they would have debates and travel around the country, right, trying to encourage Republican voters that they would be the best candidate to run against President Obama in the election. Now, previous to this, right, it was determined by a select group of people who the particular presidential candidate would be. So the people really didn't have a say. It was the power grabbers behind the scenes that controlled the political parties who had control over who the candidates were, right? And then these three kind of go together because it gives more of a direct say in government. All right, first one is an initiative that allows the people to petition to have a bill placed on the ballot in order to be able to vote, right? Referendum, kind of the same thing. If there's a law that's out there that the people don't approve of, right, they can vote to have that law taken down. And the last one, which gives a lot of the power to the people, if they feel a candidate or an elected official is not doing a good enough job, right, it can be put on the ballot to vote on whether or not that person should continue in that particular role, right? So there's been instances in American history where governors of states have been recalled from office because the people of that particular state feel that they were doing a good enough job.